and welcome to Ivanti Service Manager Training. In this course, we're going to talk about creating business objects. I'm going to give you an overview so you'll find out the description of a business object. We'll take a look at some of the uses and examples of existing business objects. And then I'm going to go in and create a standalone business object, and we'll talk about the things that go into that. The Details tab, adding fields, creating and formatting your form, your list, and your layout. Then we're going to add the business object to a role, and then we'll test it out by going to the Service Desk console and adding a record. So let's get started. So business object is basically a table that has fields in it, and you can add records to those fields. So examples of business objects that are available out of the box would be incident, service request, problem, change. Any of those, you're able to open them up and then click on New, and it's going to give you a record with the different fields, and then you're going to put the values in those fields, and then they get stored in the SQL database for that business object. Let me just close these out here. So ISM comes with several default business objects. You can see a whole bunch of them right here. If you want to see other business objects, using the administrator role, if I come over here and click on this to go to the configuration console, you'll see business objects right here. Remember, if you can't find something on this screen, you can always go to the magnifying glass and enter it, or just look here, it's in alphabetical order. So I'm going to click on business objects. And then over here on the right, these are all business objects. They're commonly used business objects. And what makes sure that they stay on this screen is there's a button here called commonly used. So if that's checked, then the business object will show up on this screen right here. So if there's any of it you're not using and you want to have it not show up anymore, you can go in and then just uncheck the commonly used. All right, so I'm going to go back to business objects here, and now you can see that that one is no longer on the on that screen. But there's a lot more business objects that come with the product, and if I come over here to the right and I choose View All, we'll give you a taste of what all is out there. Okay, I'm just in the A's right now. There's a lot of business objects that come with the product. All right, I'm going to go back a level here. Okay, and so at some point using the product, because you don't have to just use it for IT-related things, depending on what your organization does, you may decide, well, I'm going to use this Ivanti Service Manager product to track other things, maybe HR type questions that come in. So in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a scenario. We're going to have a hotel. And so when we get done, we'll be able to go to the business object that's been created and make a reservation on that business object. All right, so what I would do is I'm going to come over here to create an object, and I would choose New Object. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to build a standalone business object. You'll see these group and extensions in classes later on, but for this one we're going to do a standalone business object. Okay, I'm going to collapse this just so I have more room. And my business object name is going to be Ivanti Towers Reservations. Okay. And of course, you would map this all out, list the fields that you want. list the type of field, things like that before you get started. So this is going to be the name of my business object. If I want it to show on that first page, I can click on Commonly Used. Okay, so now I'm going to go up to Fields, and you can see there's already 6 fields there. If I click on this, I see those 6 fields. And so we've got created by, created date and time, last mod by, last mod date and time, read only, and rec ID. These are the standard fields that are going to be created whenever you create a business object. And the created by and the mod by here, these are going to get populated automatically. And you'll learn more about that in the business rules class. Okay, these are all the different types of fields that you might want to use, and each one of them has a description of, how you might use it. Some of the more commonly used fields would be binary, if you want to store graphics in a field, maybe the photos on people's badges. Boolean, that's our logical field, so you could use that for things like yes, no, on, off, active or inactive. And usually people will have this represented by a checkbox on the form. And then when somebody checks the box, true is stored in the database. If they don't check the box, then false is stored in the database. Currency, you've seen in some of the other classes that we can use or we can associate costs with things. So if you plan to use that, you're going to be putting in some currency fields there. Date and time, so we've got both of them combined there, so the date and the time. You could have just the date or just the time. Some other commonly used would be, well, the link field, but we'll talk about that when we go to do our relationships class. Number, so numeric value there. Now with the number, sometimes people want to do phone numbers. If you've got this as a numeric field, you can only put numeric values in there. You can't put dashes and parentheses and things like that. We've got some fields for passwords, and then finally the most commonly used field is the text field. So that's what I'm going to use first, is my text field. Okay, and for my reservation I would like to know the customer's name. So I'm going to put in first name. Now you'll see the field name here, and the field name can only be one word. We cannot change that later on, so make sure that that's what you want. Now the display name, this one here, you're going to want to format this. Let me show you something here. So I put first and then an underscore and then name, because when we build our forms and our lists, let me show you back here. Okay, this here is going to be the display name. So if you want it to have, have a space in between, you can do that. Another would be, okay, these over here are display names. So if you want to have it formatted, like I do with a space in between, it's in your best interest to do it here so that every time it's added, this will already be formatted and you don't have to do it manually. Descriptions, what's going to go into that field. Okay, field type. Now we selected text as our field type, but you're going to notice that these here are links. So depending on the field you type, you're going to have different options here. So for my text field, I could have Unicode text, I could have HTML, or just standard text. Now down here we've got the length. So for my text field, we've got variable with a max of whatever you put here. Then we've got fixed with the total number. Now variable, if we had the field size as 32 places there for 32 characters, if I put a value in that field that only had 2 characters, it's only going to need that enough space for the 2 characters. So it doesn't need the full 32 spaces there. However, if I use fixed up to 32 and I entered a value into the field that was only 2 characters, it's still going to take the space that it would need for 32 characters there. So this one here is more efficient, makes your database not grow as quickly. And then the fixed, sometimes people use the fixed if they're going to, build equations or things like that. But, now we can actually trim, expressions, so we don't have to have that, but it is there. And then unlimited, this would be if you wanted a memo type field. And it's not completely unlimited, it's just up to 2 gigs. Okay? And again, those will vary depending on the type of field that you selected. All right. Down here, we've got the pick list invalidated. You'll learn about that in our validation class. And then down here, we've got field annotations. So this is not a mask. This is where we can say, okay, well, this is going to be an email address or a phone number, and it's going to format it accordingly. But it's not the mask that tells them what values they can put in there, although it will search those values. Okay, so down at the bottom, you're going to have field attributes, and these here will change based on the type of field that you selected. So if I chose unique, I'd only be able to put the value in that field once. So if I added a Jane, I wouldn't be able to add another customer named Jane. So you're not going to want that. We do have localized if you want to be able to show this in another language. You can do that, and again, that's another course. And then we have hidden in UI. Maybe you don't want to have people use this for a search or things like that. You can hide it. Searched does not do anything on a text field, so you can ignore that on the text field. Stored, so this one right here, you might have a value go into a field where it's the results of an expression that you built. Well, if you just want it there temporarily, you could just uncheck stored, and so it'll hold it there, and then when you get ready to save, it's going to take it back out of the field. But for the most part, whatever somebody puts in here, we want to have it stored. We'll talk about audited a little bit later. Full text indexed. This right here, if I have a field marked as full text indexed, and I'm on, in this case here, the incident business object, if I type in the simple search field, if that field is marked with full text indexed, then that's one of the fields it's going to search. So I'll go ahead and do that. And commonly used, that doesn't do anything in the field portion. All right, so now that I have this set up, I'm going to add this field. And now I'm going to add another one, which is going to be the last name. Okay, and I will make sure it's stored, and yes, let's index on that one. And then add this field. Okay, I'm going to have another one, and it's going to be room style. Okay. And I'll go ahead and full text indexed it and then add this field. Okay, we're going to have a couple more fields that we're going to put in. I'm going to put in the room description, the floor, and then the actual room. Actually, for the date, did I put my date in here first, last, room style? Nope. So let's create that. Add new. This will be a date field, and this will be check-in. Okie doke. So down here we can see, it's got the date and time. That's the field type. And then down here, is it going to be just the date? Is it going to be the date and the time? And then you can even have time zone. If you have time zone selected, then in the Service Desk console, they'll be able to select a time zone. Well, I'm not going to have the time zone or the time. I'm just going to have the date. And I am going to add this field. I'm going to add another date field, and this will be checkout. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Just have the date field. Add this field. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the other ones I talked about, the room description, room. Okay. And I think I'll make that this unlimited here, and then add the field. Didn't spell that right. Now, if I had saved this, I wouldn't be able to go back and change the field name. What you'd have to do is, delete it and create another field. But I'm going to go ahead and I caught that one, and then add this field. People aren't going to see this one in the user interface anyway, but I'm sure it would drive me crazy if I left it there. Okay, so let's put a couple more fields in here. I'm going to put in one for the floor. And I'm going to make this a numeric field. Okay, now field type over here, it says number. You can click on it and you can see we could have that as a currency or a number field. Total number of digits, so how many spaces do you want to have? Well, I don't think our tower is going to be quite that tall, so I'll make it, how about 3 digits? Okay, now the precision, this is how many places after the decimal point. So if you want 2 places after the decimal point, you would leave that. In our case, we want to use whole numbers, so I'm going to have 0 places after the decimal point. Now, when you're using a numeric field, searched actually comes into play. Again, it's similar to the full text search, but if I click in here and let's say that I'm on the reservation business object and I want to do a search over here and I want it to check floors, then I need to choose searched. So this comes into play if it's a numeric field. It doesn't do anything if it's a text field. All right, so I'm going to add this field. And I'll add one more. Let's put in another number field for room number. Okay, I'll make that 4. I'll make this 0. You can go back in and change these, but just keep in mind that if you make it, less, then you could end up, truncating data that's in there. But you can always make it more and not have any kind of an issue. Okay, I'm going to add that field. Now, all of these say new, and so with them saying new, it means they haven't been written to the system yet. So if I were to try and create a form or a layout or something, these are not going to show up as options. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, none of those say new anymore, so the fields have been added. And then you'll also notice there's a lot of different tabs up here. So we do have to have a form and a list and a layout so that we can add values and see values and so on. So first let's talk about forms. In the user interface, when you're looking at a view like this, there's a form down here. That's a preview form. If I click on new to create a new record, okay, that's a form. And if I double click to edit a record, that's a form. So you can have different forms for all 3 of those, for creating new, for editing, and then also for the preview down here. What you want to think about is everything ultimately gets tied to the role. So if I'm using how about the front desk clerk is my role, maybe I want them to see certain information right up here at the top so they don't have to scroll. So you could do that. Maybe when they create a new record, okay, they fill in certain fields, we have them fill in. However, maybe once the record's been created, we make some of these fields read-only. So these are some options that you have, and again, it all gets tied back to the to the role. We're going to do a little shortcut, so I'm going to come over here to Details, and then down at the bottom you're going to see Auto Generate UI. If I click on that, it's going to create my form and my list and my layout. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to get rid of all of that. We don't need auto-generated on there. And just a tip, the system doesn't like you to have forms with the same name, even if they're in different business objects. All right, so I'm going to click OK. I was going to format that, but I didn't. Okay, so it created my form and my list and my layout. So let's talk about what lists are now. You might want to have more than one list for this because you want to think about where that is going to be viewed. So if I'm going to use it as my layout, so when they click on this, my list shows right up here. Okay, again, think about the role. So maybe for the front desk clerk, we want to have just certain fields right here, and we'll take some off that we're not going to use. But maybe if the role is, you know, front desk clerk manager, then maybe we have more things showing on that list view. Okay, so again, when you're doing the form and the list, think about who's going to be using those, which roles are going to be using them, and then format accordingly. Now finally, the layout. The layout is what marries the forms and the lists. So my layout, I'm going to back up here. When I click on the Incident Top Level tab, that's my tab here, everything below this is my workspace. Well, part of my workspace is the layout. And the layout consists of the search window. It consists of the list view, the preview form, the form that comes up when you go to create a new record, the form that comes up when you double click to edit a record, all of these toolbar buttons that we see right here, they're going to be reflected in that layout. Oh, and in case I didn't say it, the layout is what ultimately gets linked to the role. Okay, so let's take a look at forms. Now we did the auto-generate, so all it's going to do is take all of the fields and dump them on the form and dump them into the list. So if you don't want some of these showing or you want to move things around, you can come in here. So I usually like to show the layout cells. What that does is it's going to put a box around the cell, okay, and just makes it a little easier if I want to move things around. So let's say I want to put my last name up at the top. Just drag it up. First name, I'm going to do the same thing. And then I think I don't want modified by, so I'm just going to click on that and hit delete. And I don't want that, so I'm going to hit delete. Okay. What it does is it leaves these different rows here. If you want to leave them, let me take that off. Okay. This is what your form's going to look like. Oops, put it back on there. I like to have that on when I'm, building the form. Okay. Now you can do things depending on where you are in the form, add a top row, bottom, insert rows, things like that. Another way to get to this right here is I can click on this arrow here and click on this button, and it just pops that out. So I've got my form editor commands right here, deleting, inserting rows, things like that. I can also access that from the commands window here, so it's just broken down by whatever it is that you're, trying to do there. Okay, so for the fields, when you click on a field, you're going to see two tabs over here, Control Properties and Cell Properties. And so the control properties, those are the properties of the fields. So my room style, it's a text field. And if I come down here, I see the field name. Okay, it's not the display name, it's the field name. But if I go down a little bit further, you can see the label. That's the display name, so it puts the space in there. You can, you can change things around, like if you want your label position on the left, or you could have it on the top. Let me move this over a little bit so I can see. Okay. You can have styles for your labels. We'll cover all of that in other classes with styles, things like that. Tab index, when we get ready to set the tabs, this is going to reflect what tab this is in the order. You can have expressions on visible or not. The width, if I want to make it wider, I could put something else in here. Oops, I thought I put in my 20. Okay, so just made that wider there. Okay, now the cell properties, that's what's behind the control. Okay, so in the cell properties, there's, you can have it horizontal, top, click somewhere else. You can see that moved up a little bit. If I did the bottom, click, it goes down there. So just another way to, kind of format the cell itself. Okay, you can have it span multiple columns, things like that. Okay, so that is my form. Now I want to control where the tab order. So where my buttons, or sorry, so where my, I'm going to stop each time I put a value in and hit tab. So to set that up, I'm going to come over here to show tab indexes. It's going to put a number next to each field. So I want to start with last name. When they hit tab, I want it to put first name. Room style, I'll make that third. Okay, maybe room description, and then floor and room number, and then maybe I want to go back to the check-in date and the checkout date. So that's telling it each time I hit tab where it's going to go next. So if I'm on the 3 and I hit tab, it's going to come down here to the 4. Okay, so there's my form. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then up here, I can go backwards. So I'm going to come over here to Forms. And then from here, you can see there's the form that we just created. Now, you can copy the form. So if you want to have one that's maybe similar to this, but it's for a different role where maybe some fields are, read-only, then you could make a copy of that form and then go in and format those fields accordingly. Okay, and then you can see in here when I open it up, we have read-only. So read-only, it's going to be never or always or based on an expression. Okay, and then the same thing for making it required. So that's going to put the red asterisk next to the field. Okay, all right, so let me save that. Okay, and again, the breadcrumbs up here, I can use that. Takes me to my forms. If I want to make a copy of that, I can. Now I'm going to come over here to my lists. Okay, so I'm going to click on this list. Remember, we auto-generated it, so it's already there. Now, what the list does is it takes all of the fields and it just puts them in from left to right. And then I'm going to take first name over there. All right, maybe I don't want some of these other fields to show on the list. Just take those off. Okay, maybe these look good. I think I'll take the room description and we'll move that. Okay, now you may notice on this one here that it doesn't have it's got the floor, but it doesn't have the room number. So what happens is when you auto-generate, it takes the fields that it can fit and puts them on there. So if I want a field that's not on there, let me take these off. I'm going to come over here to the left. Okay, so we come over here, click on this, and it's going to give us fields. And then here you see the different fields. So if I want to put in the room number, I'm going to drag that over there. So now I've got the floor and then the room number. And maybe I also want to have the room style. I'll put that there. Okay. Now this is the list view. It's going to build this for me. But out of the box, so you'll see the business object here, and out of the box, these can be sorted and grouped. So let's say I want to sort these alphabetically by owner. I can click on that, and they sort ascending, click again, and they sort descending. Well, when you build your own lists or add new fields to the lists, you have to actually give it that attribute. So if I come over here and let's say I want to be able to sort on last name, I select last name, and then over here to the right, we have some options here. So here's the width. I could make it larger this way if I want to. Okay. You could also just get the arrows there and then drag it the direction that you want. And then over here it says sortable. So if you want them to be able to click on the header and sort ascending, descending, you're going to choose yes. Okay. Now groupable, you may remember that in another class we showed you that you could click on this little funnel there and choose group by this field. So they can group by the priority number. Well, you have to tell it whether or not you can group by that field. So I'll go ahead and just choose yes for that one. And then we've got word wrap. Let me turn this grouping off. Okay, so word wrap would be like the summary field. So here you can see it just truncates it. Word wrap's going to wrap the text around, and so maybe for each record it doesn't just have one line, it's got multiple lines. So that's an option. We could have it initially hidden, so they come back. But so there's several different attributes that you can play around in here. You could have it hidden based on a condition. You know, do you want to have it allow tooltips? The styles, you can have different styles here that you can choose from. Okay, you see those different styles throughout the whole product. And then the renderer, for the different field types, you're going to have different options here. So over here, what do I want? Okay, image, HTML, so on. If it were a checkbox, then I could have this show in my list view as an actual checkbox. So things like that. Oops, let me cancel this. Okay, and then again, you can, call up an image. You can have a hyperlink that goes somewhere. We're just going to keep it simple for this one. All right, now you can set your defaults up here under list properties. So if I want it to automatically, when this list comes up, I can tell it to automatically sort by a certain field. Now I'm only going to have the last name there because that's the only field that I went over here and made sortable. Okay, and then sort order, ascending or descending. Okay, you could set the default so that it grouped automatically, meaning that anytime somebody pulled the list up, it would automatically group by whatever fields you told it to group by. Now they would be able to come in and turn that group off by going up here and then unchecking the box. Okay, but this right here allows you to make it the default if you want to. And then open new tab. We're just going to choose yes so that it will open it in another tab. Now over here on the left hand side we've got workspace paging. So when I click on the top level tab here, remember it opens a tab and then everything below that is the workspace. Well, we're creating or customizing the list. So it's talking about the list view in that workspace. So over here where we've got page size, you can have a default set. So in here I can say, okay, workspace paging. Now if I leave it as 0, when they come in here it's going to say best fit. And then that's just going to show the records that would fit in just that area there. Okay, and then dashboard, we looked earlier at a dashboard. Okay, so when you've got the list view in a dashboard, here's the list view. And you're telling it how many records to show on a page. Now again, people can change that in their own environment. If a dialog box or search paging, again, you're just telling it how many records to show by default. All right, I'm going to click on Submit. And then up here, I'm going to choose Save. Okay, let me try that again. And up here, I'm going to click Save. All right. Once it's saved, I'm going to use my, my breadcrumbs up here. So I'm going to go back to lists. And just like with forms, you can copy this. Now, one thing that I didn't do that I would recommend that you do is on these different lists and forms, if you tend to have more than one for each business object, I would highly recommend that you give it a description, the forms and the lists. So give it a description right here so you know, like this is for the service desk analysts, or this is for the, HR analysts or something like that. So just give it a description, because you'll see with the incident business object, there's a lot of grids and a lot of forms, and it's kind of hard to tell who they were designed for. Okay, so there's my lists. I'm going to come back another level on my breadcrumbs. And so after I did the auto generate, it created my form and my list, and then it also created my layout. Now remember, the layout is what ultimately gets tied to the role. And so over here, I'm going to click on this. Okay, it gives it a display name. Over here, you've got the search configuration. So enable simple search. Remember, if I go to a business object, let's just do this one, my simple search is right over there on the right-hand side. Okay, you can use type ahead. So that's why when I'm over here and I'm searching for, good old Marcia, it's narrowing down my results. Okay, search all full text indexed fields. So when we were creating our fields, remember on the bottom I was checking that full text indexed. So this is telling it that whenever anybody enters a value up here, search all the fields that have been marked as full text indexed. All right. And you can have it search partial words if you want to. And then we also have the option to do a primary display field only. So normally you're not going to use the search primary display fields only. This here, they recommend using this if, let's say, we're doing a search on all these full text indexed fields and the system freezes up. Then you can just search on the primary display field only. Okay, but you're not going to get the exact same results as you would have here. And then do not sort. Well, we just created our list view, and I only made one field sortable, but let's say I'd made all of those sortable and then also set my default sort. Well, this is just telling it when somebody loads that list onto the screen, so meaning that somebody clicks on the top level tab, don't use the default sort. Let the person that's viewing it use their own sort. So it just saves it from taking a long time to load that list there. Okay. You can have things like, a saved search link, enable saved search. We could even have it where we don't have that there. All right. For the most part, the defaults, you're going to want to stick with the defaults there. Now, down below, we've got views in this layout, and we've got a form view, and we have a list view. Okay. And so what this is saying is when somebody, depending on the role they're using, when somebody clicks on the top level tab, okay, show this list and this preview form, and then remember there's a form for new, okay, and there's a form for editing. All right, remember all three of those could be different if you want to. Think about the role that's going to be using that. So if I come in here and I look at the form view here, okay, choose the try our new look. Someday this one will go away, but we still have the try our new look. All right, and so over here we see the form that it created, and then we kind of rearranged it just a little bit here. Okay, edit properties. Here's where you can give the form a different name in this view if you want to. So I'm just going to leave it as is, I guess. Okay, and that was under edit properties. Now, and you don't want to use these breadcrumbs up here, okay, because you could end up getting out of this and losing any changes you made. Okay, so then we also have the list view. And so the list view, what it's saying is, okay, this is the display name. And when we click on the list, which list view do we want to have show? So we're telling it which list view to use here. Then here's the preview form, okay? So when I'm looking at this in list view, there's the preview form on the bottom. Oops. So that's where it's telling it to use which preview form to use. Now down here we've got on request to create a new object, show. That means when I click on the new button, what form do I want to have come up? And then down here on request to edit an existing object, that would mean if I double click on something, okay, the form that comes up would be whatever you selected right there. Now a tip, because this happens a lot in my classes, well, people will come back to the user interface and they'll select a business object, but the new button to create a new record is not there anymore. The first place to look if that's not there is come back to the list view of your layout. And oftentimes these will just lose their settings and you can just pick them again. Okay, I'm going to go back to my main screen right here. And then I also want to point out initial view. This is checked. You can only check the list view, but you still have to make sure that you check it. And so what this is saying right now is initial view, meaning when I click on this incident top level tab, okay, what's my initial view going to be? And this one is a list view because it has the list on the top. Okay, and then save. All right, so there's my layout. Now, if I want to be able to see this business object in the Service Desk console, I need to link my layout to a role. Okay, now you could actually go to roles and do it that way, right here. Roles, pick a role. Or you can come over here to page layouts. I prefer this one. I think it's a little bit easier to use. So what you're looking at over here is you're looking at the different roles. And I'm going to choose Service Desk Analyst. And then over here I'm seeing the top level tabs. Now remember, you can delete ones that are there if you're not going to use them. You could come over here to you can tell it whether or not to display, okay, and this initially visible and so on. So what we want to do is we want to add a page layout to the Service Desk Analyst role. Scroll down, I've got Object Workspace, short for Business Object Workspace. Here I'm going to give it a title, and whatever you put in here, that's what's going to show up across the top. I'm going to call this one Hotel Reservation, or something near that. Okay, got an extra L in case we need it. Okay, so hotel reservations. Now the tab is initially visible. Do we want it to show here, or do we want to have it, hang out under the more? I'm going to go ahead and make mine visible. The tab can be closed by user. So when I click on a top level tab, it opens this up. Do you want the X there where they can close that tab? I think I do, so I'm going to leave that there. And of course you can have expressions where you have it not show up. Now down here, when they click on that button that says Hotel Reservations, what business object do we want to have open up? Well, we want the one that we just created. Now as you type in here, it's searching all the business objects in the system. And then it's going to come in here and you'll see the one that you want. Now layout, we only created one, so it's pretty simple. And there's our layout. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. And if I come back here to page layouts, okay, you see the Service Desk Analyst, it adds it at the bottom. So if I want to move that closer to the left on the Service Desk console page, just grab the gray box there and just drag it. Oops, I didn't You don't want the red thing there when you drag it, just right there. Okay, so now I've got home, hotel reservations, and then the rest of my top level tabs. Now if you do something, you drag around and rearrange it, you do have to choose Save Tab Order or it's not going to hold that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the role that I added that top level tab to. There's my top level tab. If I click on it and I choose New Ivanti Towers Reservations, and then in here you can see it's got, like last name, okay, room style. So I can fill in that information. If I get to the check-in date, I could, pick a date and so on. When you are testing these, it is a good idea to put a record in and save it and make sure that everything works. But for this one, we're just going to call it good. So I'm going to click on that. I'm not going to save. And there we go. Okay, so that was creating a business object. I'll just give you a high-level overview here. We used our analyst role. I'm sorry. We used our administrator role. That gave us the wrench here for configuration console, which takes us back here. Click on the home so you can see where we are. And so from back here, you can choose business objects here or here. Okay. And then we went to create an object and we chose new object. And then, because I wanted to see it on that front page there, I put commonly used, filled in the information. You'll notice I didn't give it a default form, the system did, and that's fine. Then we added our fields. Okay. Once we got the fields added and saved, then on the Details tab, we went down and we selected Auto Generate UI. And it created one form, one list, and one layout. Now, if I were to go back in and add fields later on, okay, and I come down here and I choose Add this field, okay, I'm not going to be able to add it to the form list or layout yet because it says New right here. And if you recall, new means it's not written to the database yet. So I need to make that go away by saving the record. Now, if I want to do the auto-generate UI again, I can do that, but it's just going to dump all the fields onto the form and the list and create the layout. So if I've done some work to my form and I don't want it to just be all, written over, then you can come in here and just manually add the field. I'll put it down here, I guess. Okay, so you can manually add the field and then save. Now when I do that, it's added to everywhere that this form is used. So if this form is used in multiple layouts, it's going to show that there. Go back to forms. Let's look at lists now. And let's do bed size. Okay, save. All right, so now if I go back and I look at my layout, it took that form and that list. So it's taking the updates that I made as well. So I go to Layouts, and I'll come down here to my form view. All right, and there's my bed size. And if I go to my list, over here you've got, edit right here. And you can see the list view, so there's the bed size there. Okay, so you don't have to do anything with the layouts. Okay, so we did all of that. Once we got this set up the way we wanted it to, we went to Page Layouts and selected a role. I selected Service Desk Analyst right here. Whoops. And then I did Add Page Layout and then Object Workspace. and filled in my information for the hotel reservations. Now let's say that I went back in and I created a different layout. If I created a different layout and I wanted to use it for this top level tab for a specific role, this one here, you would go to advanced options, and then that just allows you to pick from the new layouts that you have. Okay, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click on home, and that is business objects. If you need more help, or any help, here's a location within the product. So home, administer, and then working with business objects, and it'll tell you what values go in all those fields and things like that. As always, be sure to join the Ivanti Insider program so you can network with your peers. And we've put together a few exercises for you to do. So basically, do what I just did in the demonstration. Create a business object that's similar to the hotel object. It could be identical if you want to. Add your fields, generate your form, list, and layout. Remember, you can go in and customize those if you want. Link your object or your business object to a role. That's where I went to my service desk analyst in page layout and then selected my hotel. And then finally, navigate to the service desk console or user interface, however you refer to it, and then add a record.